The city of Miami and its suburbs, an area often referred to as South Florida, is one of the largest urban regions in the USA. This area has always been known for its high temperatures and beaches, but these days Miami is becoming a bigger part of the national conversation. When tech workers were leaving the Bay Area in New York City during the COVID-19 pandemic, the city's mayor reached out to that demographic and encouraged them to move to South Florida. Whether or not his enthusiasm pays off, and whether or not tech in Miami would even be a good thing, that PR move put Miami on the lips of a lot of people. However, Miami's profile has been building for years. It's almost strange to think that it was once known as a crime-ridden capital of the Pan-American drug trade. But Miami has been a lot of things throughout its history. I mean, you could also say that, in a very real sense, it's spent a number of decades now with two distinct identities. I say this because Miami exists in a sort of geopolitical overlap, by which I mean it's basically part of two different worlds. Obviously, the city is technically in the USA and has many traits specific to urban areas in that country, such as its relative wealth. But don't get me wrong, there's definitely poverty here, but even its poorest areas have basic infrastructure like paved roads, plumbing, electricity, and schools. Those may not function well in some parts of South Florida, but I think you get my point. In addition, the Miami area is undergoing the same type of gentrification that many U.S. cities are due to the nation's income inequality crisis. And like the rest of the country, as of 2021, it has to deal with a very, very dysfunctional national government. It's also worth noting that the rest of Florida runs conservative, and Miami, which is pretty liberal, often has to adhere to state policies that it would really rather not. But South Florida is also Caribbean and decidedly part of Latin America. Unlike most cities in the United States, it has a minority majority, with its non-Latino white population clocking in at only 31%. Not only that, but 37% of its population consists of immigrants, people not born in the United States. Going by those numbers, Miami actually has more foreign-born citizens than it does white Americans, and most of this immigrant population comes from the Caribbean. Because of this, while English may be the official language of South Florida, you should be able to get by with only Spanish, or maybe even French. It really is an overlap of the two regions. However, its roles in these two worlds are utterly different. Miami may be a nice place for U.S. tourists to visit during harsh northeastern winters, but it's not New York or Silicon Valley. Yet. In terms of its parent nation, it's not an exceptionally important city in 2021. However, Miami's role in Latin America is just massive. Let's look at its airport for an example. Because of its triple threat of being in the USA, serving as a stepping stone to the booming tourism mecca of Havana, and being a tourist destination in its own right, there was funding to build a public airport in Miami in 1920, 8 years before New York got one. This legacy explains why MIA today dominates the market on flights from the US to the Caribbean and Central America, and even South America. Basically, if you're flying to Latin America, you're probably connecting through MIA. This, in turn, makes it a funnel between Latin America and the world, which has resulted in some counterintuitive cultural exchanges. For example, South Florida's role as a hub is how the Miami-based subgenre of rap, with its distinctive rhythms and totally obscene lyricism, got into favelas in Rio de Janeiro and turned into the insanely popular Brazilian genre known as baile funk. This happened because Brazilian DJs on world tours would buy local Miami records on their layovers, then take them back to Brazilian cities like Rio. It says something about South Florida that, although somewhat forgotten in the US, Miami base is very much still alive in Latin America. But these connections haven't always existed. In fact, they're pretty fresh. To illustrate this, let's go back to colonial times and head to New Orleans. The Crescent City is tied to the rest of the Caribbean by history and centuries of it. NOLA was founded by the French in 1711 and was on the map of the transatlantic slave trade. It also celebrates the widespread Caribbean holiday of Carnival, albeit under the name Mardi Gras. It's just a fact that New Orleans shares a grip of cultural staples with the Caribbean. I mean, sure, it's in the United States, but historically, New Orleans is just as Caribbean a city as Kingston or Havana. Well, Miami is a different story. It's a little-known fact that the USA's Great Depression was partially caused by land speculation in Florida. People were basically selling houses in highly desirable communities to people in the Northeast that hadn't even seen what they were buying. This was a shell game because usually neither the houses or the communities existed. Miami had a population of 300 when it was incorporated in 1896, and while it grew during the years of the real estate con, it shrank when the bubble popped and the Great Depression hit. And the devastating hurricane of 1926 didn't help. It was a very small town. The relatively late settlement of white people in South Florida was mostly due to the tenacity of indigenous American tribes in Florida. This group, which wasn't originally from Florida, fought alongside escaped slaves as the Seminole. Spain never really conquered Florida, and after the Spaniards handed the territory over to the United States in 1821, the Seminole would successfully war with the USA for another 20 or so years. At the end of the war, Florida was abandoned by the escaped slaves, who largely fled to Cuba and the Bahamas, while the indigenous Seminole made a treaty with the U.S. government that guaranteed them land to the west. Most Seminoles now live on a reservation in Oklahoma, although a bunch didn't agree with the treaty and remained in Florida. The point here is that Florida itself would only be put under European control in 1846, and Miami wasn't going to blossom until almost 100 years later after World War II, when veterans moved there en masse for the weather, and were the engine that drove the city's population to rise to about 500,000. However, South Florida was still largely white at this time. There shouldn't be much suspense as to what caused Miami to become part of Latin America, though. It was Castro's successful overthrow of Batista and the following outflow of Cuban refugees, many of whom settled in Miami. For decades, South Florida was defined by its giant Latin American population, large collection of Art Deco architecture, nice weather, and its hedonistic vibe. It was also notoriously violent in the early days of cocaine trafficking, but things have changed in recent decades and in a big way. This can best be seen in the neighborhoods of Wynwood and the Design District. Gentrification sucks and we do not support it, but it's just true that these areas are ground central for South Florida's newfound identity as a cultural powerhouse. Art Basil's show is in Miami, which is a big deal, and it's turned into a global tastemaker. And the majority of this clout has been gained in the past 15 years. This is partially the result of the bigwigs at the Knight Foundation, a national charity with its headquarters in Miami, investing over $100 million in art projects in an effort to revitalize the city. Well, it seems to have worked and was very timely. Miami's resurgence came about as New York, the Bay Area, and other locations nationwide normally popular among the creative class became ridiculously, prohibitively expensive. Although Miami isn't quite at the level of those cities as far as drawing new residents, it's getting there. And if it keeps putting the effort in, it will probably be in that league relatively soon. But as someone from a tech area in California, you really don't want that crowd. Sorry, not sorry. In conclusion, South Florida sounds fun. On the one hand, the food, art, and party scenes are, by all accounts, top-notch. On the other, if you want to see legitimate Latin American culture stateside, Miami areas like Calle Ocho and Little Haiti are as authentic as you're going to get. Point being that, if you're headed to Point South and connecting through MIA, you might consider extending the layover and giving Miami a checkout. This has been another map video. Don't forget to hit the like button if you dug it, and subscribe to get notifications when more videos are posted. This video is part of our Caribbean season, and if you want to learn more about that crazy interesting region, check out that playlist. Later on.